Hey everyone, I'm having a conversation with StyxHexenHammer666. I'll leave a link to his channel in the description and you should definitely check it out because he's one of the first people I go to when I want to learn about a subject that I can't be bothered to look into myself because he provides really good and unbiased coverage. I understand you're a libertarian.
Yes, on the monarchist side as opposed to the ANCAP side.
It's probably a good thing. One thing I've noticed about the libertarians is there's a big trend toward the anarcho-capitalist side these days, and I find that really peculiar. They seem to have fully undermined the concept of the state to the point where now the arguments that seem to be winning are the ones that are just the government's evil and it doesn't have any purpose. What's your opinion on that?
I think part of that is true. Some of the ANCAPs, I think, are actually monarchists, though, and just consider themselves anarcho-capitalists because it's more trendy or something. Like, they're still making the same small government as opposed to, anarchism comments, but they consider themselves ANCAPs anyway, and I'm not sure exactly why. I think that the mainstream conservatives are being dragged into monarchism now, though. After Obama, but conflating that also with the crappy policies of the Bush era, I think a lot of people, they're more and more limited government as opposed to like neocons or something.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a definite observable trend among sort of the more traditional conservatives just towards just the reduction of the size of the American government, and it's completely understandable as well. I always find myself having to explain to people, look, American conservatives have legitimate concerns about their own government. It's enormous. It's incredibly well funded, and it's honestly, I don't think it's unrealistic to say that it's out of control. I don't think the people have very much control over their government in the US. Whereas, if you go to a state like, say, Switzerland, there isn't really much of a libertarian movement going because it's quite a libertarian country. So it's horses for courses, and I think a lot of people forget that there are legitimate arguments made against just the size of the American government, and these tend to sort of blend into the more ANCAP side of the philosophy, where suddenly all government is illegitimate, and then I have to have an argument with an ANCAP about that. But right, so
part of it I think is just abuse related because people have been like before where it was just, well, government is a little corrupt and inept and stuff. It's like, well, no shit, everybody knows that. It's like now it's fairly transparent. We've got a mass surveillance state. We do have a militarized police presence. We do have increasing censorship. Some of it the government exports it to the tech firms like they're bureaucrats. I think that's what we're seeing now is that big tech is being leaned on not just by the U.S. government but by a bunch of European and governments around the world too. So one country wants blasphemy laws enforced, another one wants multiculturalism enforced, another one wants almost nationalism enforced, and so you get all these weird competing messages, but each trying to censor everybody, and the governments sort of do that for them.
Yeah, I've got to I've just got to warn anyone in America. Never let them put in a hate speech law. Just do not allow them to do it. Resist it with everything you have, because I swear to God, in Britain, we have people going to jail over Facebook posts and Twitter posts. I mean, this is legitimately what happens when you have these things, and I think it's a travesty. And I'm genuinely envious of America's freedom of speech. I honestly am. So yeah, let's talk about the eclipse. I hear it's racist.
Yeah, I haven't heard that it's racist, but I have heard that it's ushering in the end times. The stars are going to start falling from later on. You and I are going to get to see the stars falling from heaven, and Satan will pop out of the ground at some point. It's going to be quite a show. I can't wait to live stream it.
Oh, fabulous! Yeah, I'll get a lot of clicks from that. That's excellent. So,
who was saying it was racist though?
Oh, I can't remember now. I just I saw it floating around on Twitter somewhere. I should have saved it really, but it's got to the point where just things are so ridiculous. I can barely pass this anymore. I mean, like I'm going to do a video on a short video I found on Facebook of it's this big fat black woman talking to a crowd of clearly upper middle class white people, and she literally begins it by saying, well, all white people are racist, they're demons, and she's got this kind of airy happy-go-lucky atmosphere and sort of face on, and she's trying to essentially condemn them all, and she can barely bring herself to do it. And it's just like, yeah, this is just, I mean, the absurdity of it is revealed in her own delivery of what she's trying to say.
No, the funny thing is, it seems like people are worried right now, I think, about hate being normalized. They don't realize hate has already been normalized as long as it's directed against the so-called majority groups of
Yeah.
individuals. It's perfectly okay to be racist or sexist or something. You just have to make sure you aim it at the right group. If you aim it at some as Antifa would call it, historically marginalized group,
Yeah.
then it's a problem. Anyone else, like, oh yeah, you can say like racialist things to them. It's okay. You can rant about Yakub or something.
For anyone who for anyone who doesn't know who Yakub is, would you like to quickly explain it?
Yeah, he's the glorious Messiah who created everything, and apparently like white people were made. Did he make them, or were they a mutant?
I believe I don't think that he was the one who created them. I think that I need to brush up on my black knowledge. I
Yeah, it's something that I don't remember learning about in Black History Month in school, but okay, it's on the internet. It must be true.
That's because the white man's a racist and he wouldn't teach that. But yeah, so I think this is actually an interesting thing to talk about because, I mean, you don't consider yourself to be alt-right, do you?
No.
No.
I used to say, it's like they made a Rational Wiki article about me, which was really funny. I had to try to reform the article myself because it was so inaccurate. I considered myself on the fringes of the alt-right during the election for a time, and then the alt-right was warped out of all proportion. What had been basically an internet-based movement of people who were anti-political correctness turned into a bunch of Stormfront Nazis. And that's never been what I'm about. I can go back, and I've been delivering the same pro-liberty content for a very long time. My beef with the other side, with the far left, was over censorship and oppression. It had nothing to do with, white demographics or anything like that. And I think people got the wrong idea, so I backed off that content because I saw that people increasingly, I think, considered me to be some sort of LARPing Nazi or something. And that's not what I am, so.
No, I never got that impression from your content at all. And I think, I'm, you probably already know, but for anyone who doesn't know, I've always considered myself to be centre-left. I went through a rather progressive phase in my 20s, which I think a lot of people did. But I've returned to a sort of social liberal perspective. I still think a welfare state is a good idea. And, at least a social safety net is a good idea, and I think socialised medicine is also a good idea, and it's something that we can afford as society, so I don't see a problem with it. But I'm also very much coming from the sort of classical liberal tradition rather than the Marxist tradition. So I don't dichotomize the world into oppressor and oppressed. I'm not in favour of censorship. My main contention with the far left was not only the censorship, but the racism. And I think this is something that's important to talk about. Like, the alt-rights haven't appeared out of nowhere, like in a vacuum. You can't say there isn't a huge amount of anti-white propaganda. Because, as you said, it's okay to be, the amount of Dear White People articles you see and videos, and it's just like, this is just unacceptable to me. You can't just target a race based on the fact that they are that race and then tell them that they're doing something wrong.
Yeah. See, I've compared it to like 50s era. If you look at ads today, a lot of them, they depict men as like basically Neanderthals. Yeah. Basically, they're dumb. They need their woman to tell them what to do. Mm-hmm. Whites as boring, straight men as being not hip, not stylish. They're like slobbish. They need their gay friend to dress them, basically. Otherwise, they're totally clueless. They'd walk around in a loincloth. And what I do is I like to look at old retro ads. And if you look at old ad reels from even the 80s, really, it's not even that long ago. It's basically just an inversion of that, where before it was all like, white dudes, they're the businessmen, and here's like the token black in the ad.
Yeah.
And this person's like just the janitor or something, and then the woman, she's got a flat tire, she doesn't know what to do. The big strong man needs to come along, smoking a Marlboro, of course, at the time, and fix it with our product. And what we've done is we've seen that inverted, but it's still the same message. It's exactly the same thing. It's just aimed at different people. It's the same thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
It's still I mean, I don't have a problem with things being offensive because I don't believe in censorship, but can't people see that it's the same shit?
You know what I find really interesting is I grew up in like the 80s and 90s, and the movies that I used to consume, they were already diverse. And I mean, I don't really put any stock in the concept of diversity. I literally do not care about the races of the people on the screen that I'm watching. I care about the characters. I mean, I used to watch The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and not once was I like, well, there are no white people in this, you know. But then I was watching, you know, like Predator and Aliens, and it never really occurred to me that, you know, these casts, if you look at them, there are plenty of... There is diversity there already. It just never occurred to me. And then, yeah, it's exactly the same. When you go to, like, normie television, it very much is tropes and stereotypes. And I'm not, you know, I don't think this is all deliberate or anything like that. I'm sure it's all the unconscious biases of the people who made it. But this whole, like, push for diversity is... The worst part about it is that it's controlling. It's all about top-down control. And they never give you an end goal. They never say, right, we want it to be exactly this. They just want more. And more and more. I mean, what do you think? Do you think there's any like validity to any of this?
I don't care. I would be like you in that sense. I really don't care who's cast in a movie, who's cast in a TV show, what the ad says. It's all for profit anyway. It's like the golden age of good race relations in this country sort of coincides with like the Grand Theft Auto era, when people are riding around San Andreas. No white kid ever picked up that game and started playing it and saying, oh, well, that's a black protagonist and I have a problem with this. No, it was a fun game. Nobody cared. It was just trying to tell a story, and it wasn't being pushed off on anyone. It was fun. It was hilarious, you know, with all these different characters. Nobody had a problem with it. But then these firms started to virtue signal, and they started to be very deliberate in casting and very deliberate in their ads and everything, and trying to push it off as a social message. It doesn't need to be about a social message. Just make your product. If this show has nothing but a black cast, I don't care. But if you get preachy about it and start putting in a social message about, oh, the white oppressor, yeah, it's a little bit different, and that's what they've been doing, I think.
See, as soon as someone starts getting preachy about things, I'm always just reminded of the sort of American right, the conservative Christians from like the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Exactly.
Where they would, and these people were just the worst. The absolute, they were just insufferable. And it's the same insufferable busybodiness that we see with the diversity crew now. It's just let people alone to make their own things. Good grief, is that really so hard?
Yeah, they're like the temperance era people who are worried that dudes they had long hair, they needed to crop that short, shave off their beards, stop drinking, stop chewing tobacco, stop carrying guns around. I mean, it's tied in with gun control. Even the suffragettes joined up because their original movement was more about making sure that their men weren't being, you know, assholes basically than anything else, almost more than voting at first. Yeah, we definitely have that now, but I'd say parts of the right are still guilty of that. They don't get exonerated for that. There's still a lot of fire and brimstone people in our culture, and they're still making the same tired arguments about gay people and about abortion and communist conspiracies. It's not a communist conspiracy. What it is a moral panic involving what traditionally is seen as left, but they're not even like liberals anymore. They're way out there with Antifa or the worst of the social justice warriors.
Okay, so I totally agree. They're not liberal at all. They've gone full authoritarian at this point. But right, coming on to Antifa, what is your opinion of Antifa? What do you make of them?
I call them a criminal organization, not a terrorist one. This petition that's circulating around sets a dangerous precedent. I mean, in theory, okay, doing this allows you to enforce the law more effectively. Okay, I get that to anyone watching that signed the petition. But you don't need to label them a terrorist group. Trying to shut Antifa up by giving them that designation will probably cause them to grow. It's not going to magically make them go away. I mean, if that were the case, then when the KKK got labeled a terrorist organization, they would have just gone home, hung up their hoods, and stopped existing. That didn't end up happening. It continues to smolder because there will always be a subset of the population that's receptive to their message that basically, oh, we're the underdogs, we're fighting for you, and the evil government is against us. Antifa sort of already makes that argument, and it makes them probably more dangerous if they're labeled a terrorist group. I would rather them just label them a gang, which is sort of what they are. They show up, they throw shit at the police, literally and figuratively. They beat on some bystanders. They were beating on BLM down in Dallas. There was a video of that was circulating.
Really, I didn't see that. If anyone can send me a link to that,
it was an unlisted video that was. I'll send you the link at some point.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll tweet that out to you. But yeah, it's crazy. But the thing is, you want groups that are fanatic to speak freely. I don't believe in censoring far right, far left, fringe, anything, because when they're speaking publicly, they can be humiliated for their views. They can be criticized and challenged, and maybe you can even take people out of those groups by convincing them, hey, you know, if they just sit in an echo chamber, there's no one to convince them that they're wrong. They get worse, they get more fanatic.
I think I don't mind them being called a terrorist organization, because by the literal English definition of terrorism, that is what they do. I don't want to be censored. What I want is for the government to, or just any authorities really, to actually take some action against them. I'm so tired of hearing how the mayor of Berkeley has told the police to stand down because Antifa are protesting Milo Yiannopoulos. No. I'm sorry, the authorities should take some action, because these people are beating people up, they're destroying property, they're causing trouble. I mean, don't stop them from making media, don't stop them from, getting on a soapbox on a street corner and pontificating to a crowd of people. But as soon as they start, smashing things up or hurting people, that's where they cross the line, in my opinion. And yeah, I'm so tired of watching the authorities do nothing.
Yeah, but they don't need a terrorist designation for that. All the federal government just needs to make it clear to local and state police, hey, enforce the laws properly. These stand-down orders are technically unlawful because you're exposing people's private property and their safety to a group that has already become violent in that situation. That's what they should be doing. Declaring them a terrorist organization isn't going to solve anything. It's not going to make them less violent. Anytime they get violent, a few of them at least get arrested. I would think that over time that would help solve the problem.
Well, that's honestly, I don't mind either way, just as long as the authorities actually do their damn jobs, because that's what they're there for. That's the whole point. And to give one group a pass because they claim to be acting righteously, and to condemn another group that they're attacking because they don't agree with their political position, I don't care. The state should be a neutral arbiter in this and shouldn't play favourites. That's but I mean, like I said, I really don't mind if they just classify them as criminal, as long as they do something, because it's really gone too far. And I mean, I watched a video today where a professor at I can't remember which university, he was on a local news station with a chap from the Southern Poverty Law Centre. And the chap from the Southern Poverty Law Centre was actually against Antifa, and he was actually saying, well, we should be doing something. They shouldn't be allowed to attack. And I was just like, my goodness, I never thought I'd side with the SPLC on anything, given their track record.
Yeah. And there's the silver lining to what's happening now, is that violence is becoming prevalent enough so that groups that were just sort of, oh, the right wing is a problem, they're going to become like Nazis or something. I think increasingly we are going to see them go after groups like Antifa. I don't think that they probably see it as marketing suicide not to at this point. If they do get declared a terrorist organization, which, does a change.org position really cause that to happen?
This one's a White House one, actually.
Yeah. Trump is probably inclined to do so. Some people in Congress, but I mean, a lot of them are cowards, including a lot of the Republicans. And they'll see this as what it would be branded as by like the CNNs of the country is, oh, they're declaring Antifa a terrorist organization, but they didn't do that with the alt-right, therefore they're Nazi sympathizers. I don't think that's something that at this particular moment they're going to touch. But the SPLC and groups like that occasionally get it right. Like when you look at the hate map, I think that's the SPLC, isn't it? Or is it the ADL or one of these groups?
I'd have to check.
It does include black nationalist groups, too. It's not like they're trying to be deliberately one-sided on every issue. So it's like the ACLU. Everyone wants to call them far left when they're defending somebody who is a leftist. likewise, a lot of people said, oh, we can't support the ACLU anymore. I mean, people on the far left, because they were defending the right of people who are basically, you know, kind of Nazis to protest. And it really depends on which person, the crowd you're talking about.
Yeah, and the ACLU actually have kind of impressed me recently, just on the consistency of what they're doing. I mean, they got a lot of, they caught a lot of flack for defending Milo Yiannopoulos, which they're currently doing at the moment. And I mean, I understand that there are people who are going to be annoyed about that, but I'm sorry,
the ACLU just defends whoever's being censored or abused at the time.
Yeah.
That means like 10 years ago, that was some anti-war marcher. They were probably on the left somewhere. Now it's people who do real-life shitposting, basically.
Yeah, and good, and good for them as well, for actually standing by the principles of the thing rather than playing favourites. Because, and I know I keep bringing this up, but you see it so often. But with the whole Trump, they're going to call him a Nazi sympathiser. They're already doing that. I've seen that so much, and it's like, why do you guys think he's a Nazi sympathiser? What? Because he condemned both sides. Rightfully so. And then like 2 days later, he comes out and gives the explicit denunciation of the right, and it's like, well, yeah, don't get me wrong, but he was just like, both of these groups are bad. That isn't Nazi sympathizing, and I'm really annoyed to just see it non-stop and in incredible outlets as well, or at least theoretically credible.
Yeah, no other. It's like when people said that Obama faced unprecedented obstruction, only within Congress. As far as the media and popular culture, it was anything but obstruction. It was more like considering him to be some sort of messianic figure at times. And he came on all the comedy shows, standing ovation. He'd go on he could even go on Fox, and they're not going to challenge him because he's Obama. Trump, meanwhile, has to dig around the internet for a few friends. He's being more culturally obstructed than Obama ever was. And Congress is basically, but Congress obstructing him isn't so much, it's the deep state activating. They did the same to Obama. Congress is simply dysfunctional. The people that have been voted into Congress are totally dysfunctional morons, don't know what they're doing. They can't agree on anything. Their natural proclivity is to do nothing.
Do you know what's really interesting? I saw an article a few weeks ago that it really did highlight the problem of the system. Congress itself, as an entity, has an approval rating in single figures, but the individual congressmen often do quite well and are repeatedly elected, re-elected, and return to Congress. And it's like, look, you guys have to understand, it's the congressmen themselves that make up the Congress. So if you keep re-electing these same people, you're going to keep getting the same results. And for some reason, they keep managing it. I honestly don't know how that happens.
Yeah, it's like a little miniaturized cult of personality, because it's more like people don't want to rock the boat or something unless they do something like totally off the wall, like, a sex scandal or something. Yeah. It shouldn't be that way. What we do need are term limits for these people. Agreed. Relatively short term limits, I would say. Yeah, and we also need to reverse Citizens United. By the way, I'm not a pro-corporate libertarian. I'm a very anti-corporate libertarian. Pro-business. Under our current tax code, multinational firm pays nothing, small business pays through the nose. Yeah. The politicians are basically, they might as well slap logos on their backs of what companies bought and sold them.
Yeah, we have exactly the same problem in this company. I mean, we even have a system by which the UK government pays corporations money for whatever reasons, to operate in our country or whatever. And we end up giving them huge tax breaks to the point where you've got, Google was paying £1.6 million in tax in 1 year. And it's like, no, Google is worth billions. They make billions in profit, and their tax bill is absolutely tiny. There's something distinctly wrong here, and there are obviously regulations through the roof that make it very difficult for small businesses to even get started. And there are so many pitfalls that they can find themselves running afoul of just by mistake, by simply not knowing the system well enough, and then suddenly they've got a huge fine that ends up crippling them. It's a real problem, and it's another one of the reasons I want to get out of the EU. But right, so let's talk about some of the other things that have been happening. Trump fired Bannon. What do you make of it?
I think that Bannon was never meant. I think Bannon himself mentioned he would only be on for 6 to 8 months, so that's fulfilled. Trump, I think. projected off all the weird sort of beliefs. I know some people who are more nationalistic are like, well, those are good beliefs. Okay, but the perception over reality, the average person in society still thinks Bannon is totally out there and crazy.
Oh, yeah.
So Trump needs to shed that perception. What I said was he was going to move more towards not centrism per se. He's still on the ideological right, but away from sort of the more nationalistic side. I think he'll retain that on trade, which is good. It's sort of A/B testing. He's found that even people who are Democrats didn't like the TPP, so he abandoned that. I think in the first day that after taking the oath of office, he's like, nope, not signing it. It's dead. Going after China would be a Bannon proposal. He may retain that. But on the social side, I think he's going to be more of a unifier now from this point forward. And that's actually what the country needs. It's like calling out both sides in Charlottesville. You can't just fixate on one side or the other. People who are like regular mundane liberals or conservatives do this all the time in an election. They're like, oh, we must stop the other side that's so out there and so abusive and wrong. And it's the same thing. The conservative and the liberal in that sense, basically the same.
Yeah, one thing that I don't think they understand how disenfranchised the sort of the swing middle is. You know, the voters who aren't committed to either side. And I mean,
yeah, that's why Trump won.
Absolutely. I mean, it must have been a hell of a choice where you've got Hillary Clinton, who's effectively the avatar of the corporate state, and you've got Donald Trump, who's not exactly good on PR. You know, I mean, who do you vote for there? And at the end of the day, you know, I'm glad it went to Trump, because I think Hillary would have just made the problem just worse and worse and worse. And then the next 4 years would have passed, and then things would have been so much more tense. You know, I think a lot of pressure has been released.
A lot of people right now that are worried, it's like when the media says, oh, Donald Trump is enabling Nazis or something. They're not understanding that those groups didn't spawn and rise up in a vacuum. If Hillary Clinton had won, the social alienation of the right that actually led to those groups growing would have been far worse. They would have kept growing continuously, and there would be 10 times as much of a problem with fashy haircut and everything else under the sun. That would be more prevalent. Hillary Clinton would have been the one actually enabling them. Trump being in office doesn't enable that. It actually strips some of the arguments away. A lot of these people during the election were saying, oh, the deep state has already won. The election will be rigged for Hillary Clinton. You watch, she'll be elected. I never expected that to happen, because I see them as rigging primaries and then just having controlled opposition candidates. You don't need to rig the general. Romney or Obama, they stand for the same thing. It doesn't matter which one wins. When Trump got elected, though, it didn't enable far-right groups. It didn't embolden far-right groups. It simply took pressure off of them so that they felt more inclined to speak about what they believe. But that's cathartic. Over time, that means that the true fringe, the violent folks, lose out to people who are more moderate, even within that fringe. If it had gone the other way, then the fringe would be winning out. That's why I warn against these tech firms censoring everyone who has an opinion that runs outside of the mainstream. You are going to create two ideological echo chambers, maybe more, in which Antifa becomes the moderates on one side, and in which people who visit Daily Stormer on a daily basis become the moderates on the other, and get supplanted by people who are even, just totally crazy. They'll start building pipe bombs or something.
Yeah, I mean, we think of these two fringe groups as incredibly radical, but and they are incredibly radical. But that's not to say there isn't anything beyond them, because there will be. There always is.
And there are moderating voices that sort of circulate around them because they're part of public discourse. If that's stripped away, if Hillary Clinton wins, says, no, we're banning these fringe groups, or if the tech firms do the same, it makes the problem way worse. Even Business Insider. Now, Business Insider is basically corporate outlet number one. Even they were saying this last night. After people on YouTube and elsewhere have been saying it for days now, and some of us for years. They just barely got on board. Even they're recognizing that attempting to censor these groups is going to become a huge problem.
Yeah, I mean, driving them underground just makes them. I mean, for every time that there's someone who is dissatisfied with the status quo, these people are a place for them to go. And this was the thing with the alt-right, because people forget that the alt-right, I mean, what the alt-right had a civil war, effectively. It became the alt-light and the new right, and then the alt-right retained their, like, white nationalism and Jew hatred and all this sort of thing. But people forget that, like, it didn't have to be this way. You know, that most people aren't like that. And the alt-right grew because they all got lumped together and, you know, oh, well, all of you people are the same. It's like, well, they're not. But if you tell them they're all the same, then these people get to mingle and they get to gain new converts.
And it didn't help.
No,
it
not
didn't
at all.
help. But every time somebody on the far left said, oh, everyone on the right is a Nazi, then you've got this one group saying, yeah, we're Nazis, basically. Yeah. All the other people they're not part of that group, they don't even necessarily have racialist views of any kind. They get driven into such groups. Mm-hmm. The same is true when people conflate garden variety liberals with communists. Like when they went after Obama and said he's a Muslim Kenyan socialist, what you did is drive a lot of center-left individuals further to the left, because they saw those comments that were being made, began to research socialism, which we've been under anyway for a long time, so it's no surprise. And they said, well, there are these groups over here that are actual socialists, and I'm getting tarred and feathered with that label. Why don't I go check these people out? And all of a sudden, Antifa and similar groups grow. The same happens on the right. The way to prevent them from becoming more fanatic, the way to prevent violence, if that's what people are interested in, because I don't think the average person, I still think, wants free speech in the country, except for people on the fringe that they throw things
most people
place.
do, I think.
Yeah, if you want to prevent those, if you want to preserve freedom and prevent violence, all you have to do is allow them the same public platform they've all had.
Yeah,
because then they're not in an echo chamber.
Agreed. Totally agreed. I've got to. If I don't call you on the being under socialism thing, I'll get it in the neck. So why do you say that you're under socialism at the moment?
Yeah, the U.S. has been under socialism since the government instituted property taxes, which apply to businesses, which means it is not physically possible to own the means of production in a private manner. You're renting the means of production, number one. Number two, the tax rate is lopsided, overly burdensome, and it favors, here's the secret, it favors corporations that are intervened in directly by the government. They give them grants to produce goods. They give them favorable contracts. They help them design trade deals. If the in order to have capitalism, you need two things. You need a free market and you need free trade. The government involves itself in every micromanaged aspect of trade in this country. Mm-hmm. It is all controlled. There is no free trade. So there's strike number one. Strike number two is if you can't physically own the means of production in most states anyway due to property tax, if you have to purchase a bunch of licenses and pay a bunch of fees to do business, then it's not a free market. You can't simply set up shop on your front lawn. And I mean, there are kids getting their lemonade stands busted down, and getting $1,000 fines. That is not a free market. In a free market, you set up your lemonade stand and people voluntarily, they choose whether to patronize that business, essentially is what it is.
Right.
We're under, so there are no, as far as I know, there are no nations in the world today that function at all that are under full capitalism. There are countries that are less socialized, but they all contain basically socialism.
Right. Okay. I'm not gonna get into the big discussion of it with you now, but this is something we could talk about. I'm just gonna state that I don't necessarily agree that that's. I wouldn't describe that as socialism. That to me sounds like something Mises would say. But I mean, I'm not saying it's illegitimate. I'm just putting on record I don't necessarily agree with that. But it's definitely something we can discuss another time. Right. Okay. So, oh Christ, that's made me lose what I was gonna say. What was I going to say? I was going to say something else.
Thinking of anarcho-capitalism and you zoned out for a minute.
Yeah, well, I started getting into the whole... I know what the socialists are going to say. I know what the ANCAPs are going to say. And I'm just starting thinking, right, okay, I think these are extreme interpretations of either end. But, okay, so, I mean, what else do you see coming on the horizon? What problems do you see us heading into?
Well, I think that general political struggle is going to be the main problem for some time. Trump can swing to the center, but that doesn't alone solve the problem. You're going to see more calls for censorship. At some point, people will wise up to the fact that that's a bad idea. Now, alt tech is already growing, which is actually, I know you're on Minds.
Yeah.
Minds is alt tech.
Yep.
Gab is alt tech. Hatreon for its.
Just to interject with Gab, there was a recent, I'm going to call it a hit piece in The Times, which is probably the most respected newspaper in the country. I mean, I actually pay for a subscription to this service. It's the only one I pay for.
Cancel that.
I'm thinking about it. But the thing is, it is also valuable in other ways. But they called, the headline was, far-right platform raises $1 million. And I was just pulling my hair. I don't even have an account on Gab. You know, it's not that I think there's anything wrong with it. It's just I have too many different platforms anyway, and I can only manage so many. You know, but Gab are obviously not a far right platform. It seems to be the contention of they don't censor the far right. That seems to be why they called them far right. It's ridiculous.
But they don't. But if this were Breitbart, it might be far left platform. Do you remember back in the good old days when Bill O'Reilly said that 4chan was a far left website? That was like I think it was 2000. I kid you not. It's a famous image, and it was so funny at the time. And now everyone considers it the world's largest repository of neo-Nazis.
Yes.
So how do the fact is that it's just whatever prevailing ideas. That was the end of the Bush administration.
Oh no.
Were speaking out against it on places like 4chan. So they looked at the audience, determined that the site itself was far left. Oh, this is run by like Marxists or something.
Yeah.
Now they look, backlash against Obama and globalism has taken root, and all of a sudden, oh, no, now they're far right. It's the same thing, and there were the same dumb calls to censor things back then. They've been doing this for a long time. It's not part of an overall conspiracy on one side or the other of the political spectrum. It's authoritarianism. They don't care who they're censoring. They just want their foot in the door so they can censor more, because then they can dumb everything down. They've done this on radio. They did that successfully. They did it on TV, centralize that. They're trying to do it on the web. We have to reject them. That includes people on the left. Look, they were trying to censor you. Not that when I was more of a liberal years and years ago, because I was sort of part of the anti-war thing under a rock. There were attempts to censor that material. I can remember Facebook, one of its first sort of censorship campaigns was against Zeitgeist. Zeitgeist, a compilation documentary that is extremely anti-religious, totally anti-war. Bush is the devil. That was one of the first things they really put their effort into censoring at the time. They were going after anti-war figures left and right, and that's from the left. Now all of a sudden, their new censorship is aimed at people that are on the ideological right. My big worry isn't even so much that they're going to go after hate groups, so-called. You know, if someone is inciting violence, okay, that's fine. I don't have a problem with them kicking them off some platform for incitement. My worry is that people that defend the free speech of those groups insofar as they're just speaking will also additionally be targeted. Case number one would be Gab. Gab isn't far right. Gab just has a lot of far right people on it because that's the group that happens to be censored at the time. Just like 4chan at the time was sort of a haven for people who were just anti-war liberals. That didn't mean they were pro-censorship or anything, but the Bill O'Reilly comes on, they're way past the Democrats. They're just trying to destroy culture. They're socialists or something. It's like now it looks so surreal in retrospect.
It does. Well, you know, I actually think for all of its faults, and I never use 4chan. This is the thing. Every now and again, someone will send me a post where someone's posted one of my videos to 4chan, and then there'll be a dozen replies. Hello, Sargon. I'm sat there thinking, this is the problem with you being completely anonymous. Is you're on a witch hunt constantly. I don't use 4chan. I'm too old, too useless to use 4chan. But I think it's a valuable weather vane of the way society is going. This is where the disenfranchised go to have their voices heard. And if the prevailing wind is extremely right-wing, then you can tell who's being censored and who wants to speak out. And these things become... Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I'm sorry. These things are a predictor of future problems that we're going to have. You know, movements are growing and, you know, it's kind of like the underground of the internet. You know, where, you know...
Dark underbelly.
Yeah, it absolutely is, but you've got to pay attention to it. You can't pretend that it doesn't exist, and you're not going to just get rid of it. I mean, like the deplatforming that's been going on with like the Daily Stormer and Patreon and all this. I mean, I don't like the Daily Stormer. They before they were taken down, they must have had like 4 or 5 articles on me telling me how awful I was, and calling me a cuck and all this, and they do with everyone else. But I don't want to see them. I don't like a witch hunt and just. It's not even a witch hunt. It's like vigilante justice, like a digital lynching of 4chan when they go to the service provider and say, "Oh, you're hosting this stuff that we don't like. Remove it." And it's a huge public campaign to put pressure on these people. And it's like that's just a mob of people, forcing someone off a platform just because they don't like them.
Yeah,
it's
I think
a
the
worrying
Daily
precedent.
Stormer had a problem with me too after I weighed in on Mike Enoch that time. I was sort of laughing about his problems. And yeah, they were making and on 4chan there have been shit posting threads about me before, and it comes with the territory of being known online, so it's like it's not really a problem. But I fully support 4chan, and I use primarily politically incorrect, a little less frequently now than during the election. But mostly I see it as a force for good in the world. Good being perhaps a subjective term. Because it's because people are anonymous there, and because there's no real censorship there, there's where the free speech is taking place. Try doing that on Reddit. Reddit now at a whim basically kicks off any group that they happen to have an ideological problem with. It doesn't need to be engaged in raiding people or posting illegal content. It's just they didn't like you. They decided to shut you up. I think their mods there were trolling actually people by switching their comments at one point, and that was something a lot of people
I saw that. Just randomly editing people's comments just because they didn't like them.
And 4chan sometimes trolls the user base, like on B, in the golden age, back when that was the main page, the random page. I can remember they used to troll people all the time, like they'd have some auto-playing video or a song on loop, something annoying, or they'd fuck around with the colors. And it's all good, and it's just sort of part of that subculture. But it becomes a repository of any maligned group, any group that's being suppressed, like people talking about European issues on there. They can't really talk about it anywhere else because they might get a knock on their door. Some person in Germany saying, "Oh, yeah, I think hate speech laws are bullcrap, multiculturalism doesn't work." But, years and years ago on those platforms, it was, I'm against the war, but everyone's just so jingoistic. There's nowhere else to talk about it, basically.
Well, I mean, in Germany, they absolutely will get a knock on their door. This has happened many times.
From the Gestapo.
Dozens of people. Yeah, absolutely. Wasn't there someone who was actually part of the Nazi regime? Not the Nazi regime. The Stasi, the East German secret police, actually working for Facebook. Krauts T told me about it, and I'm not kidding. This woman actually worked for the secret police in East Germany, and now she's working with Facebook.
I wouldn't see people shouldn't necessarily be held, full liability for like they were part of a group that held to be part of in the past.
I'm not trying to censure though or anything, but it's ironic, isn't it? It's amusing.
A little ironic.
So one of the things that annoys me is the resistance to things that people like, say, in the alt-right are asking for that are actually reasonable. For example, like the white genocide thing. I don't agree that there's a genocide going on. I don't agree with the way they frame it. But I do agree that immigration needs to come down in the West in general. Mass immigration is a burden to the societies it's happening to, and one of the quickest and easiest ways to diffuse the alt-right would simply be to reduce mass immigration. I mean, you could just cut the rug out from under them. What's your big complaint?
The problem being a lot of people consider that bigoted. That's the big problem with trying that reform. I would say building a fence or a wall on your border and deporting people who have committed crimes is not a form of bigotry.
No.
Additionally, a lot of that illegal immigration, and both the far right and the far left are so dumb when they talk about it. When they talk about illegal immigrants, they assume that they're all brown people from Mexico, and that's simply not the case. There are hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants in this country from Europe, especially from Eastern Europe. These are people of purely European extraction. They're illegally here too, and if one of them commits a crime, I would want them deported. Now, I have been called, honestly, a cuck by people on the far right, because my thing is, I do support a wall. I do support deporting criminals, and I do support bringing the overall number of newcomers down. But I don't believe in going door to door, basically getting rid of the Fourth Amendment in the meantime while doing this, in order to deport every man, woman, and child who ever came here illegally. I think it would start a civil war if we did. I don't care if people have a problem with me having that opinion, because I mean, some of these people, they're telling me, oh, well, there are actually like 35 million illegals in the country, which, by the way, is bullshit. They're quoting the wrong number that also includes children born to illegals here. This was explained to me last night. I'm like, oh, well, yeah, no wonder I'm seeing an inflated number. So these people are indicating that they see no larger problem with deporting a tenth of the population's total, or like a 12th of the population. Like 1 in every 12 people who is physically in the country at the moment would be deported. That's not going to cause a logistic problem. It's not going to cause any form of, you're not going to need to mobilize the military to do it. Of course you would. Yeah, and a lot of people, if you knock on the door of some survivalist to say, hey, we're going to check your bunker for illegal immigrants, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, it's a tragedy in the making, isn't it?
To that.
Yeah.
We ain't take too kindly to that down here in Texas.
but it is. It's and it's excessively authoritarian. You know, I think there are much more effective and casualty-free methods of doing this. And I think the first one just being, like Trump's suggestion with the immigration, reducing immigration to a points plan like Australia or Canada, is fantastic. There is literally nothing to complain. I mean, like, okay, a border wall is not racist. That's a stupid thing for anyone to say. You know, a pro-America.
Well, remember, a statue is also racist. So, inanimate objects now are possessed of volition.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. A pro-American immigration policy is not racist. And I tell you what, I loved Stephen Miller's press conference where he got Jim Acosta on that. That was just the most beautiful way of demonstrating what he called the cosmopolitan bias, the inherent bigotry of the position that Acosta held. Exactly. Like, what a brown person speaking English. It's like, Acosta, you bitch. Yeah. Half of Africa has English as an official language. India speaks English as its official language. You know,
India, the business language. Most of the people in the Philippines, a vast majority of people in Thailand. Yes, clearly, only white people speak English, including all the Maori who have learned English, or Aboriginal people in Australia, totally white.
Yeah, exactly.
Purely European.
Exactly, but it's the progressive narrative, isn't it? It's, people are groups. Brown people, they're not English speakers. And it's like, gotcha, right in the nail.
And this is an argument, like the alt-right deliberately handicaps itself, which is really funny, by saying, oh, well, it's not about Dems are real racist, but they kind of are being. Yes. Can't you see that?
Yeah.
This is strictly racially motivated in every possible way. They're making the assumption that the only time that an immigrant could reasonably be considered to be likely to be fluent, or at least, conversational in English before coming here, is if they're from the UK, maybe Australia, New Zealand, Canada, or something like that. What are you talking about? Most of the English speakers in this world are not white. Most of them, as far as full fluency goes, most of them are from India or the Philippines or some other part of South Africa. Or Southeast Asia.
Africa's full of English speakers. This is the legacy of colonial empires, is colonial languages, of which English was the largest.
That's not a bad thing either. Like, some people say, oh, they should regress back to some other language. Why? The effort required wouldn't make any sense whatsoever.
No, this is something that I really found myself baffled about. I don't see language as being anything other than a tool to communicate, and so that there are multiple languages in the world, I just find to be a barrier to my communication with other people. I don't see any glorious cultural heritage in a language. It's a functional thing for me. But
unless we developed like one world language, but that would get into the realm of stuff. Maybe a good pragmatic idea, but I think that a lot of religious people around the world would be really, really averse to it. So
they absolutely would.
Yeah.
But the what I was saying though with the alt-right is that look, if you want to get rid of the alt-right, you can just stop doing the things that are feeding people into the alt-right. Like, I mean, the mass immigration is one of them, censorship is one of them. You know, if you stop these two things, the alt-right, that's like two of their pillars of contention just knocked out completely, and the whole thing becomes
and their semi-reasonable arguments, not the methodology. Like the methodology mentioned by some people in the alt-right is, oh, we'll just purge all the minorities. Well, that's not going to happen.
No.
And people were saying that the alt-right is not the first group to mention that it wanted to do that, and no prior group has ever gotten traction either.
Yeah.
And I would say also the way to suppress the far left groups is likewise similar. There are certain legitimate grievances they have when there is police brutality. Mm-hmm. I mean, in a reasonable sense. I don't mean the police arrested someone who is not white, therefore it's brutality.
Yeah,
I mean actual, like Philandro Castile, who was shot for happening to be black while carrying a firearm. And by the way, he did nothing wrong. He should not have been profiled in that manner. When you have those elements, if you institute proper police reform, a lot of Antifa's stuff goes away, because if there's no police brutality, then Antifa, even to the most far left individual, is going to look like the actual thugs.
Yeah.
Right now, though, what they see every once in a while is, oh, the police beat this innocent person down, they punched this pregnant woman. It does happen. You have to address these things. That is a legitimate concern, not to the extent that they extend it to, but the core concern, there's police brutality sometimes in the country. It needs to be stopped. And there goes their argument. So there you go.
One of the things that I learned the other day, apparently American police are only trained for 6 months, which seems to be a remarkably short period of time. I think in Germany it was 2 years. I think it's over here it's 2 years. And that would go a long way to diffusing the legitimate complaints these groups have. And I mean, this just seems to me to be sensible pragmatism. It's like, okay, what are their major complaints? Rather than spending all the time suppressing them and actually giving them legitimate victim narratives. Because at this point, the alt-right can legitimately say, well, we are the victims of societal and state oppression, because they are, you know, and it could end up being the same thing with Antifa. Why not just try and take away what they're what they're holding up to complain about as soon and like you say, the reasonable parts of what they're saying, not necessarily the methodology of how they got there, but if there is a reasonable argument to be made for what they're asking for, then do it. It's okay. I mean, there are lots of other people saying less immigration, lots of other people saying less police brutality, lots of people saying, well, the prison industrial complex is a problem. Yeah, damn right it is. You know, if you want to put people in jail, you should pay for that out of your own pocket. You know, that's.
But see, here's the problem with making that very reasonable argument. You and I may see that as reasonable, but people on the far left, if you start saying, well, yeah, there are a couple of legitimate things that the alt-right has alluded to. Their methodology will never work, but the core problem, it does exist. They say, oh, you're a Nazi sympathizer. If you say that about Antifa and you suggest for a moment that, yes, there is indeed profiling that some police forces have done, there are cases of police brutality that are cut and dry. It has nothing to do with, oh, you know, you just hate police or anything. Then they'll say, oh, you're either a cuck or you're a communist, basically. Mm-hmm. And like, I've faced this for years. I get into it with someone on the far right. They immediately assume I'm a total hippie. I get into it with someone on the far left. They allude to me being like a Nazi or something. And it's just totally dumb. Yes. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I can look at a group and I can say I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything they're saying, but find a few kernels of truth in there and say, well, this group would basically implode if these were actually addressed. But I don't think the government wants this to be addressed. I think largely people in the government like to have a little street violence because then it justifies, you know, more militarization, and we need more money for surveillance, and we need more censorship, and it makes it easy for them. The corporate politicians are terrified of free speech on the internet. I'm not surprised they're seizing on Charlottesville and saying that the solution is to censor people. It's not going to solve anything.
It's not just the corporate politicians either. It's the corporate establishment.
Yeah,
everything, you know, the media, you know, large corporations, the government, the whole complex that has built up and is reliant on each other. I mean, if I were them, I would be looking at the growth of just independent activity by citizens of countries all around the world, and I would be shitting a brick. You know, I mean, the size of YouTube and the popularity of YouTube channels that are coming up. I mean, the numbers that someone like Philip DeFranco does. He is just one man talking about something in an impartial way, and my God, he's one of the most popular news commentators on earth. You know, he's larger than the Young Turks, which is an entire organization. I mean, that shows you the power of just an individual who has merit can genuinely rise now. And these people who have, you know, they've been institutionalists. They work their way through the institutions, finally getting to the top. They're seeing that just being eroded away by some guy with a webcam.
And
that's
good
a terrible. Yeah, absolutely. Damn right, good riddance. I can't wait to.
Yeah. When you point that out, a lot of people say you're far right too. And then if you aim that same criticism at like Fox and Breitbart, and you're like, well, it's the same thing. It's basically just corporate propaganda. Oh, well, no, Tucker Carlson is great or something. No, he's not. Tucker Carlson is good at reading a script.
Yes. To be fair, though, in Tucker Carlson's defense, his expressions when he's dealing with the far left are priceless. You know, you can't take that away from him. But I mean, I remember when Jon Stewart was actually credible and sat down with Tucker Carlson and who's the other guy on Crossfire? I can't remember his name. But he just sat there. And
it's been a long time since I watched any corporate media.
Oh, God, yeah, me too. But this was literally like a decade ago. But he just sat there and told them both their face, look, you're hurting America. You're both terrible. Go away. And it was like, wow. I mean, I genuinely liked Jon Stewart back then. Now things are different.
Yeah,
Same with Stephen Colbert.
Cash, and all of a sudden he switched his mind.
Yeah, so suddenly he's not going to cause any waves. Strange that, but I'm genuinely looking forward to the future. I mean, we're coming into the era where I think the big money and the corporations, the people who have a lot to lose, realize that they actually stand to lose everything because we're coming into a more decentralized, social media has done this, a more decentralized world where power isn't going to accumulate in the same way as it did before. And I think this bout of censorship, this bout of shutting down literally anyone, you know, they don't have to be far right. I mean, and I do think that the Daily Stormer types are the canary in the coal mine. It's going to keep coming. Like the advertiser, I assume your channel has been hit with the demonetization spree as well. Yeah?
I assume so, but I never monetized anything.
Oh, wow,
So
yeah.
I don't take ads in any way, shape, or form. I never did.
Well, you're a more pure person than me. But these things are all, I think, you know, basically like a beachhead to try and hold back the tide. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think in like 10 years' time, we're going to be we'll be past all of this, and we'll be in an entirely different world.
Yeah, a lot of these big tech firms will be either smaller or have significant competitors or won't even exist in 10 years. Like people who say that, oh, well, it's hegemonic, like Google, nothing can challenge them. Yes, but these firms, Sears used to be like that. Walmart used to be like that.
MySpace used to be like that.
Yeah, MySpace is the best tech example probably. Yeah. Or think of something like Dig. Or any of these other services. Who's used it lately?
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody. But it was obviously big. It's still a sharing function even for YouTube videos. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen anybody use it in the last 5 years.
No, but this is the thing. I mean, Google at the moment does have an enormous market share, but that will change. Yeah. You know, if they I mean, the thing is with Google, it's a very interesting story because they got where they are by being better than everyone else. And I had nothing to complain about until recently when they decided to start exerting their power after accumulating it. And it's like, okay, but you got this legitimately. I have no contention with the way Google achieved what it's achieved, but now it's achieved it and it's starting to, you know, go against the sort of impetus of society. Other people will just start doing things better than Google, and you know, in like absolutely. And so I'm actually not too worried about it. I mean, I'm worried for my own personal position, but in general, I'm not too worried.
It's the thing. Google operates YouTube at a loss. Like Google has because they don't care if YouTube operates at a loss. They don't have a reason to maintain full functionality of the platform. Maybe they don't have a reason to innovate it quite as much as a firm that has to work out how to also make money for a video platform. And I think we're beginning to see that now. They're talking about and beginning to test sites where it's totally decentralized and the cost of serving stuff out and storing it is actually decentralized too to people's like personal computers or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea, having like torrent-based video hosting. It needs another
like
platform.
BitChute, isn't it?
It needs another platform built over it for the same full functionality. You have to give people interaction. It can't just be they're absorbing the content. They have to be able to interact with it easily. And there needs to be a low learning curve, was what I'd say to the alt tech firms.
Yeah.
It's like Gab. Twitter runs at this point at a loss. It's hemorrhaging users. It's losing stock. People aren't, even lame streamers aren't, I think, confident about it continuing to exist for more than a few more years. Gab already exists. Probably what they're worried about is that Gab, which is branding itself as a free speech platform, is going to end up absorbing a hell of a lot of Twitter's user base. Not because of ideology of those people still being pro-free speech, but simply because it'll be the only other stable platform to replace it.
Yep.
If that happens, then alt tech has won a major victory, and the main sort of text platform would be a free speech site. I think they're terrified of that. I think they're terrified of Minds. I think they're terrified of upstart crowdfunding platforms. They're certainly terrified of new video hosting sites, because if they can figure out how to run at a consistent profit while delivering the same basic service, especially in a form that can't be censored, well, it's the death knell of the old guard of social media.
But
and social media, in turn, killed off the old guard of what had been sort of the standalone sites. Even MySpace was kind of like that, before they rebranded themselves and then fell flat. Social media destroyed all that. It crippled a lot of these old sites that had been really popular. Like, think of all the chat rooms that had been online. Well, all of a sudden, you didn't really need that to interact with people. And so things that had been gargantuan, now a lot of them don't exist anymore. And the same will eventually happen to the social media firms of today if they don't innovate. But part of that is they're going to have pro-free speech on their platforms. Otherwise, a lot of people won't be able to use them. They limit their own audience.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll. I guess we should probably wrap it up about that. But really, the future is looking quite bright, just because of the amazing ability of human innovation. But it's the problem we're having at the moment, I think, is we're currently in the bumps of the early stages, because people forget how young the internet really is.
Yeah.
I mean, this is still a really young medium and a young sort of tool that we have at our disposal, especially in the sort of advanced stage that we have it now. But anyway, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the chat. I'll leave a link to your I'll leave a link to your channel in the description, and I'm sure we'll do it again sometime.
Oh, of course.
And everyone check out his channel. It's really, really good. And I'll speak to you all later.
Peace out.